Don't let him take another bite. The cry tore through the crystal ballroom 3 seconds before Emilia Hart knocked a silver dessert plate from the most feared man in New York. The chocolate cake struck the marble floor, scattering dark crumbs across polished shoes and silk gowns, and the entire charity gala fell silent. Emilia stood frozen beneath the chandeliers, her flour-dusted hands trembling at her sides. She was a 32-year-old plus-size baker who owned a struggling shop in Queens, a woman accustomed to customers praising her pastries while whispering about her body the moment they thought she could not hear. Tonight, she had been invited only because her bakery donated the desserts. She wore a simple navy dress that hugged her full figure, and she had spent the evening enduring smirks from wealthy guests who treated her like part of the catering equipment. But none of those people frightened her as much as the man staring at her now. Adrian Moretti was not simply rich. He was the Mafia Boss whose name could empty a restaurant without anyone asking why. Tall, controlled, and dressed in a black suit worth more than Emilia's yearly rent, he ruled his world with a calm voice and an unreadable face. Men twice his size lowered their eyes when he entered. Politicians returned his calls. Enemies disappeared from his business long before they ever reached his door. Yet behind his cold authority lived a man hollowed out by betrayal, a man who had buried his younger brother and never trusted kindness again. Adrian slowly looked from the ruined cake to Emilia. "You have 5 seconds to explain why you touched my plate." 2 guards seized her arms before she could answer. Their grip tightened, and laughter flickered through the crowd. A woman in a silver gown leaned toward her friend and whispered that Emilia had probably thrown herself at the cake because she could not resist food. The cruelty was quiet, but Emilia heard it. Her cheeks burned. She lifted her chin anyway. There was something wrong with it, she said. The frosting smelled like bitter almonds. Adrian's expression did not change, but his eyes sharpened. Emilia knew how ridiculous she sounded. She was a baker, not a detective, and the room had already decided she was an unstable woman desperate for attention. Celeste Vane, the elegant socialite standing beside Adrian, gave a delicate laugh. "Bitter almonds? Adrian, she is embarrassed because she dropped the tray earlier. Now she needs a story." Emilia turned toward her. "I didn't drop anything." Celeste smiled without warmth. "Then perhaps you were jealous." More laughter moved through the ballroom. Emilia felt every stare travel over her body before reaching her face. She had spent years being underestimated, but humiliation still found the same tender places. Adrian watched her closely. Most people begged when his guards touched them. Emilia did not. She was frightened, exhausted, and clearly ashamed, yet she kept looking directly at him. That courage unsettled him more than her accusation. "Search her," Celeste said. One guard reached into the pocket of Emilia's apron and pulled out a tiny glass vial. Gasps spread across the room. Emilia stared at it in disbelief. "That isn't mine." Adrian took the vial between 2 fingers. The label had been removed. His jaw tightened. "You came near my table. You destroyed my food. Now poison is found on you. I was trying to protect you." Everyone says that when they want something. The words left him colder than he intended, but an old memory had already surfaced. His brother smiling across a dinner table hours before betrayal destroyed their family. Adrian had learned never to mistake innocence for truth. He looked at his lieutenant, Luca Rinaldi. "Take her out through the service hall." Emilia's face went pale. "Please test the cake." Adrian said nothing. "Just test it," she insisted as the guards pulled her away. "I know sugar, chocolate extracts, and every scent that belongs in that frosting. What I smelled does not belong there." The ballroom doors closed behind her. Adrian turned to the crowd and lifted one hand. Music resumed instantly, but the celebration felt hollow. Celeste touched his arm. "You handled it." Adrian glanced toward the broken cake. A small white napkin lay beside it, marked with Emilia's fingerprints where she had grabbed his wrist before knocking the plate away. He remembered the terror in her eyes. Not terror for herself, terror for him. "Send the dessert to the lab," he ordered. Celeste's smile faltered. 20 minutes later, while Emilia was being driven toward an abandoned warehouse near the river, Adrian stood alone in his private office as his doctor placed a test strip on the desk. The strip had turned black. "A concentrated toxin," the doctor said. One more bite could have stopped your heart before the ambulance arrived. Adrian's gaze dropped to the security footage playing on his monitor. The camera showed Celeste's assistant near the dessert table, slipping something into the frosting while Emilia watched from across the room. Then it showed Emilia running toward Adrian, ignoring the laughter, the guards, and the danger to herself. She had not attacked him. She had saved his life. Adrian grabbed his phone and called Luca. No answer. He called again. Still nothing. For the first time in years, fear broke through the Mafia Boss's perfect control. Find that car, he ordered his men. Now. But across the city, Emilia's vehicle had already disappeared into the darkness. The black sedan carrying Emilia Hart turned off the highway and entered a deserted industrial district along the East River, where broken streetlights flickered over rusted loading docks and empty warehouses. Her wrists were not tied, but the two men beside her made it clear she was not free to leave. Emilia pressed herself against the cold leather seat, trying to control her breathing while the city disappeared behind rain-streaked windows. She had saved Adrian Moretti's life, yet his final order still echoed in her mind. Take her out through the service hall. She did not know exactly what that meant in his world, but the silence of the guards told her enough. "You're making a mistake," she said. Neither man answered. The driver turned into a fenced shipping yard and stopped near Warehouse 17. One guard opened her door. "Get out." Emilia stepped onto the wet pavement, her shoes slipping slightly as the wind pulled at her navy dress. She thought of Hart's bakery, the small Queen's shop she had inherited from her father, with its cracked blue sign and unpaid electric bill waiting beneath the register. She thought of the dough she had left rising in the kitchen, and the elderly customers who came each morning because she remembered their names. She had spent her whole life making warm things for people. Now she might disappear in a place that smelled of oil, salt water, and rust. Inside the warehouse, a single hanging lamp cast pale light across stacked crates. The guards led her toward a metal chair. Emilia stopped. "No." One of them frowned. "Sit down." I said no. Her voice trembled, but she stayed standing. "If Adrian Moretti wants me dead, he can look me in the eyes and explain why saving his life deserves punishment." The men exchanged glances. Before either could move, headlights swept across the warehouse windows. Tires screamed outside. The doors burst open and 6 armed men entered with Adrian at their center. He wore the same black suit from the gala, but his tie was gone. Rain darkened his shoulders and the calm mask on his face had been replaced by something far more dangerous. "Step away from her," he said. The 2 guards obeyed instantly. Adrian's voice had not risen, yet the entire warehouse seemed to tighten around it. Luca Rinaldi appeared behind him, breathing hard. The order was misunderstood. Adrian turned his head slowly. "I gave no order to bring her here." "You said take her out." "From the ballroom." Adrian stepped closer. "Not from the world." Luca lowered his gaze, but Emilia noticed the slight movement of his hand toward his coat. Adrian noticed it too. In one swift motion, he seized Luca's wrist and forced it onto a crate. A small syringe fell from the lieutenant's sleeve and clattered across the floor. The liquid inside was clear. Adrian stared at the man who had served him for 7 years. "You were supposed to kill her before she could speak," he said quietly. Luca's face hardened. He shoved Adrian backward and reached for a weapon, but Emilia saw the second guard moving behind Adrian with a metal pipe. "Behind you!" she shouted. Adrian turned just as the pipe swung. He blocked the blow, struck the guard once, and sent him crashing into the crates. His men surrounded Luca and the remaining traitor before another attack could begin. The violence ended almost as quickly as it started. Adrian stood beneath the hanging light, chest rising slowly, his expression colder than the rain outside. "Lock them in separate rooms," he ordered. "No one speaks to them until I arrive." His men dragged Luca away. Only then did Adrian look at Emilia. Her arms were wrapped around herself, and a bruise was beginning to form where one guard had gripped her. Adrian crossed the space between them, but when she stepped back, he stopped immediately. That restraint surprised her. Men with less power had ignored her boundaries all her life. Adrian Moretti, who could silence a warehouse with 3 words, gave her room to breathe. "The cake was poisoned," he said. Emilia swallowed. "I told you." "You did, and you didn't believe me." The accusation hung between them. Adrian removed his coat and held it out. She did not take it. "Is this how you apologize?" "No." His eyes dropped to the bruise on her arm. "This is how I keep you from freezing while I decide how to repair what I did. You can't repair everything with money." "I know." The answer came too quickly, carrying more pain than she expected. He stepped closer, slowly this time, and placed the coat around her shoulders only after she stopped resisting. It was warm and smelled faintly of cedar and rain. "Why did you save me?" he asked. Emilia looked at him as though the question itself offended her. "Because you were about to die. You didn't know me. I didn't need to." Adrian studied her face. Everyone in his life calculated value before choosing loyalty. Emilia had risked humiliation and death for a stranger simply because it was right. He lowered his voice. "You noticed the toxin before my security team, my doctor, and every man paid to protect me. Bakers notice when something doesn't belong." A faint, unexpected softness touched his expression, but it vanished when his phone vibrated. One of his men spoke urgently from the gala. Adrian listened, then looked toward the syringe on the floor. "Celeste is gone," he said, "and every security file from tonight has been erased." Emilia's stomach tightened. "Then how will you prove what happened?" Adrian's eyes returned to her, darker now. The footage was copied before it disappeared. By whom? He turned the phone so she could see a frozen image taken from the ballroom camera. It showed Emilia near the dessert table several minutes before the poisoning, but beside her stood an older man wearing a baker's jacket. Emilia's face drained of colour. "That's impossible," she whispered. Adrian watched her carefully. "You know him." Tears gathered in her eyes as she stared at the screen. "That man is my father." Adrian said nothing. Emilia's voice broke. "He died 8 years ago." "That man cannot be my father," Emilia whispered. But Adrian Moretti had built his empire by recognizing the difference between grief and deception, and the terror in her eyes told him she believed every word. Rain hammered the warehouse roof as he enlarged the image on his phone. The older man wore a white baker's jacket, embroidered with the faded blue initials RH, the same initials printed on the sign above Hart's Bakery. His face was thinner than Emilia remembered, his hair almost entirely grey, but the slight bend in his nose remained unmistakable. Robert Hart had supposedly died in a highway accident 8 years earlier, leaving Emilia with a struggling bakery, $40,000 in debt, and a grief she had never learned to carry without smiling. Adrian studied the timestamp. "This was recorded 16 minutes before you knocked the cake from my hand." Emilia pulled his coat tighter around her full figure. "I saw my father's body at the funeral." "Did you identify him?" "The casket was closed because of the fire." Adrian's gaze hardened. In his world, a closed casket was not proof of death. It was an opportunity. He ordered his men to secure the warehouse, then drove Emilia himself to a guarded townhouse on the Upper East Side. The streets shone beneath the midnight rain, and neither of them spoke until she noticed he was taking them away from Queens. "I need to go home," she said. "Your home may already be compromised. My bakery is not part of your world. It became part of my world when someone used your apron to plant poison and your father appeared beside my dessert table." Emilia turned toward the window, hurt tightening her face. "So I'm still a suspect." Adrian gripped the steering wheel. "You are the reason I am alive." "That is not the same as trusting me." Her words struck deeper than she knew. Adrian had spent years demanding loyalty while offering none in return. At the townhouse, he led her through a quiet living room lit by amber lamps. There were no servants, no music, and no family photographs. The home felt expensive but untouched, like a place designed for survival rather than living. Emilia noticed a framed newspaper clipping on a side table showing Adrian and his younger brother Matteo opening a neighborhood food bank 10 years earlier. Adrian turned it face down before she could read more. "You can sleep upstairs," he said. "I'm not sleeping while someone is using my dead father's face." Adrian looked at her for a long moment, then handed her a secure phone. "Call anyone you trust." Emilia dialed her bakery manager, Tasha Green. The call connected, but instead of Tasha's voice, she heard glass breaking and a man breathing heavily. "Tasha?" Emilia said. A scream sounded in the background. The line went dead. Adrian was already reaching for his weapon. 10 minutes later, They arrived at Hart's bakery with 2 black SUVs behind them. The front window had been shattered, flour covered the floor like snow, and every display case had been smashed. Emilia rushed inside despite Adrian's warning. "Tasha!" She found her manager locked in the walk-in pantry, shaken but unharmed. Tasha clung to Emilia, then stared fearfully at Adrian. "They wanted the blue recipe book," she said. Emilia went still. "My father's book?" Tasha nodded. "They said he hid something inside it." Emilia hurried to the kitchen and pulled open a loose panel beneath the old wooden counter. The blue book was gone. In its place lay a photograph of Robert Hart standing beside a much younger Adrian outside a hospital. Emilia turned the photograph over. Written on the back were 6 words in her father's handwriting. "I saved him once. Protect her now." Adrian's face lost all colour. 8 years earlier, after an ambush in Brooklyn, a stranger had dragged him from a burning car and treated his wounds before disappearing. Adrian had searched for that man for years. "Your father saved my life," he said. Emilia stared at him. "Then why would he help poison you tonight?" Before Adrian could answer, police sirens flooded the street. Officers entered with weapons drawn and a warrant bearing Emilia's name. Detective Marcus Shaw stepped forward and placed a tablet on the counter. It showed bank records documenting a $200,000 payment to Emilia from a company connected to Adrian's rivals. "Emilia Hart," Shaw said, "you are under arrest for conspiracy and attempted murder." "I have never seen that money." Adrian moved between her and the officers. "No one touches her." Shaw's eyes narrowed. "Protecting a suspect will make this worse." "For whom?" Adrian asked quietly. The bakery fell silent. Then Emilia's secure phone rang. She answered on speaker and a familiar male voice filled the room. "Emmy, don't trust the police." Her knees nearly gave way. "Dad?" Robert Hart breathed her childhood nickname as if no time had passed. "Celeste knows you found the photograph. She is not working alone. The person who ordered Adrian's death is standing inside the bakery with you." Every face turned. The lights went out. A gunshot cracked through the darkness, and Adrian threw himself in front of Emilia as the front window exploded. Adrian hit the bakery floor with Emilia beneath him as the bullet tore through the front window and buried itself in the brick wall. Flour exploded into the air, turning the darkness white, and for one terrifying second, Emilia could hear nothing except Adrian's heartbeat against her ear. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. "No." She touched his shoulder and felt something warm. "But you are." The bullet had grazed him, cutting through his jacket and leaving a dark line of blood across his upper arm. Before she could examine it, emergency lights flickered on. Detective Marcus Shaw stood near the shattered window with his weapon raised, but he was not aiming outside. He was aiming at Tasha. "Put the phone down," he ordered. Tasha's trembling hand hovered over the counter, where Emilia's secure phone was still connected to Robert Hart. "Detective," Emilia whispered, "my father said the traitor was inside." Shaw's expression changed. The patient authority vanished, leaving something cold underneath. "Your father should have stayed dead." Adrian moved before Shaw could fire. He shoved Emilia behind the steel kitchen counter and hurled a heavy mixing bowl across the room. It struck Shaw's wrist, sending the weapon skidding beneath a table. Adrian's men rushed forward, but 2 uniformed officers turned their weapons on them. The arrest had never been real. It was an extraction. Shaw grabbed Emilia by the arm and pulled her toward the rear door. "Celeste said you were harmless," he hissed. "Just a lonely baker desperate to be noticed." Emilia drove her heel down on his foot, twisted free, and slammed the freezer door into his face. Shaw staggered backward. Adrian crossed the kitchen with terrifying calm, caught him by the collar and pinned him against the wall. "Use her name," Adrian said. Shaw laughed through bloodied lips. "You still don't understand. Celeste didn't plan this. She only introduced us to the man who did." A smoke canister rolled across the floor. Grey clouds swallowed the room. By the time Adrian's men restored order, Shaw and the corrupt officers had escaped through the alley. Tasha was safe, but Robert's call had disconnected. Emilia stood beside the ruined ovens, staring at the place where her father's blue recipe book had been hidden for years. "He abandoned me," she said, her voice breaking. "He let me bury him. He let me believe I was alone." Adrian's anger softened. He dismissed everyone except Tasha, then sat on an overturned flour bucket while Emilia cleaned the wound on his arm. Her hands shook as she pressed gauze against the cut. "You should have stayed behind the counter," he said. "You should stop ordering people to survive while you throw yourself in front of bullets. I threw myself in front of you. That does not make it smarter." Adrian looked up at her. In the weak golden glow of the emergency lights, flour dusted her dark hair and tears shone across her cheeks. He had seen powerful men collapse under less pressure, yet Emilia had fought a corrupt detective with a freezer door. "You were right about the cake," he said. "You were right about Luca, and you were right not to trust me." She stopped wrapping the bandage. Adrian lowered himself from the bucket until one knee touched the flour-covered floor. The most feared mafia boss in New York knelt before a woman the ballroom had mocked hours earlier. "I condemned you before I knew the truth," he said. "I cannot erase that, but I can promise no one will ever take your voice from you again, not even me." Emilia's defenses cracked, but she did not fall into his arms. Promises from powerful men usually protect the powerful man. Then judge me by what I do next. Tasha suddenly called them toward the old industrial oven. While clearing broken glass, she had found a narrow metal compartment behind the temperature panel. Inside was a sealed envelope addressed to Emilia. The letter carried Robert Hart's handwriting. "Emmy, if you are reading this, they found the book. The recipes are not recipes. Every ingredient, temperature, and baking time records payments made by the Moretti organization to judges, officers, and rival families. Adrian's father created the code. I stole the ledger after learning someone inside his family planned to kill both sons and seize the empire." Emilia read the final line twice. Matteo's death was not caused by Adrian's enemies. It was ordered by Adrian's uncle, Vittorio Moretti. Adrian went completely still. Vittorio had raised him after his father died. He had comforted him at Matteo's funeral. He was also hosting the family council the following night, where Adrian was expected to sign control of the shipping routes into a permanent trust. Emilia looked at the destroyed bakery and finally understood why her father had taught her every recipe by memory. "The book is gone," Adrian said. "It doesn't matter." She lifted her eyes to his. "I know every measurement." At that moment, a video appeared on the secure phone. Robert was tied to a chair inside an abandoned commercial bakery, and Celeste stood behind him holding the blue book. Vittorio Moretti stepped into view and smiled directly at the camera. "Bring Emilia to the family council before midnight," he said, "or her father dies, and Adrian's empire burns with him." Emilia expected Adrian to order her into hiding. Instead, he placed the choice in her hands. "I will not use you as bait." She stared at the man who had once ordered her death, then at the coded recipes that could expose a betrayal buried for 8 years. "You're not using me," she said. "We're going together." Adrian rose and stood beside her as dawn began to colour the broken windows. Then Emilia noticed one final sentence written beneath her father's signature, a warning that made her blood turn cold. "Vittorio knows Adrian survived the first poisoning because the second dose is already inside him. You have less than 2 hours before the poison reaches your heart," Emilia said, and for the first time that night, Adrian Moretti looked afraid of something other than losing control. Dawn had faded into a grey morning over Queens, but the clock above the ruined bakery read 10:07 p.m. when Adrian's private physician confirmed the toxin was slow-acting, absorbed through the cut on his arm when the corrupt guard struck him at the warehouse. There was no standard antidote. The only formula had been hidden inside Robert Hart's coded recipe book, now in Vittorio's hands. Adrian leaned against the steel counter while his men prepared for the family council. His face remained calm, but sweat darkened his collar and his fingers had begun to tremble. "You are not going," he told Emilia. She stood across from him in a clean burgundy dress Tasha had found upstairs, Adrian's coat still resting over her shoulders. "My father is there. The antidote is there, and I am the only person who understands the recipes. That is exactly why Vittorio wants you. Then stop treating my courage like a weakness you need to protect." Adrian's jaw tightened. He had ordered armies with less resistance than the woman before him, yet Emilia did not lower her eyes. She stepped closer and placed her palm against his chest, feeling the uneven beat beneath his shirt. "You gave me a choice," she said. "Do not take it back because you are scared." Adrian covered her hand with his. "I am scared because the thought of losing you feels worse than dying." The words silenced them both. He had not planned to confess anything, but poison had stripped away the walls he had spent years building. Emilia's eyes softened, though her voice remained steady. "Then stay alive long enough to prove it." At 11:18 p.m, black vehicles entered the Moretti estate in Westchester, where towering stone walls surrounded a mansion glowing beneath cold white lights. Inside the Grand Council chamber, 20 family leaders sat around a long table while Vittorio Moretti stood at its head. Celeste waited beside him in a silver gown, and Robert Hart remained tied to a chair near the fireplace. He looked older and thinner than the man in the security footage, but when Emilia entered beside Adrian, he whispered, "My Emmy." She nearly ran to him. But Adrian's hand closed gently around hers, not to restrain her, to remind her they had agreed to face the room together. Vittorio smiled. "Adrian, you look unwell." "You poisoned the wrong man twice," Adrian replied. "Tonight you will not get a third chance." Vittorio addressed the council. "He arrives with a baker accused of attempted murder and expects us to trust him. Sign the shipping trust before midnight, Adrian, and I may let her father live." A contract waited on the table. Signing it would surrender Adrian's empire to the uncle who had murdered Matteo. Refusing would trigger explosives Vittorio claimed were hidden at Moretti warehouses across the city. The clock showed 11:32. Celeste opened the blue recipe book and held up a small vial. "The antidote is simple," she said. "Sign, and Emilia can save you." Adrian picked up the pen. Emilia's heart dropped, but instead of signing, he snapped it in half. "Burn every warehouse," he said. Gasps spread through the chamber. "I can rebuild an empire. I cannot rebuild the people you buried beneath it." Vittorio's smile vanished. Adrian turned toward the council and placed a flash drive on the table. His men had recovered fragments of the erased gala footage, along with Luca's confession and Shaw's financial records. Screens around the chamber lit up, exposing Vittorio's payments, Celeste's role in the poisoning, and the order that led Matteo into an ambush 8 years earlier. Several council members rose against Vittorio. Celeste grabbed Robert and pressed the vial against the floor. One step closer and the antidote breaks. Emilia studied the blue book in her hands. The vial was not the antidote. Her father's recipe for almond glaze required 3 ingredients stored in every commercial bakery: activated charcoal, strong coffee, and a binding syrup. The measurements were coded into the page number, oven temperature, and baking time. "She is lying," Emilia announced. "That vial would accelerate the poison." Celeste's face betrayed her. Emilia moved toward the service cart near the wall and began mixing the real formula with supplies Robert had secretly arranged before his capture. Vittorio reached beneath the table for a hidden weapon, but Robert kicked the chair into his knees. Adrian's men disarmed him as Emilia finished the dark mixture and carried it to Adrian. His vision blurred, and he dropped to one knee. She held the glass to his lips. "Trust me." Adrian drank without hesitation. For several unbearable seconds, nothing happened. Then his breathing steadied. Colour slowly returned to his face. Emilia turned toward Celeste, who had seized a ceremonial knife and was rushing toward Adrian. Emilia stepped between them, caught Celeste's wrist with both hands, and refused to move. "You spent all night calling me weak," she said, "but I am still standing, and your lies are finished." Adrian rose behind her and took the knife from Celeste without harming her. At 11:59, the council voted to strip Vittorio of authority and place him and Celeste into federal custody, using the evidence Robert had preserved. Adrian crossed the chamber, took Emilia's hand, and faced every person who had once judged her. "This woman saved my life twice," he said. "From this moment forward, disrespecting her is disrespecting me." The clock struck midnight. Then a red warning flashed across the security screens. Vittorio began laughing as a live camera feed appeared, showing Hart's bakery surrounded by flames. The image of Hart's bakery burning filled every screen in the council chamber, and Emilia's cry cut through the room before anyone could stop her. "Tasha is still there!" Adrian Moretti caught her hand as she ran toward the doors. "My men will reach her." That bakery is my home. Then we save it together." Less than a minute later, Adrian, Emilia and Robert raced through the midnight streets in the lead SUV while fire crews fought their way toward Queens. Adrian was still pale from the poison, but he refused the doctor's order to remain behind. Emilia sat beside him with one hand wrapped around her father's and the other gripping Adrian's coat. She had spent 8 years believing Robert was dead, yet there was no time to ask why he had abandoned her. Ahead of them, orange light stained the sky. When they reached the bakery, flames were pouring from the second-floor windows. Tasha stood outside with firefighters, coughing beneath an emergency blanket. Emilia rushed to her, but Tasha shook her head. "A little girl is inside. She came through the back door looking for her mother. I couldn't reach her." Before anyone could react, Emilia pulled the blanket around her shoulders and ran toward the entrance. Adrian caught her at the door. "You are not going in alone. You can barely stand. Then keep me standing." They entered together beneath a spray of water, Adrian shielding Emilia from falling debris as she guided him through the smoke-filled kitchen she knew better than any map. The heat was brutal, and every shelf carried memories of her father teaching her to knead dough, of lonely mornings after his funeral, and of customers who had made the small shop feel like family. Near the pantry, they heard crying. Emilia found the child crouched beneath a metal table and pulled her close. A burning beam crashed behind them, blocking the front exit. Adrian placed his body between Emilia and the flames while she searched through the smoke. "The delivery door," she shouted, 20 feet to the left. He carried the child while Emilia led them through the narrow passage. They emerged seconds before part of the roof collapsed. The crowd erupted as the little girl was returned safely to her mother. Adrian dropped to one knee on the sidewalk, weakened by smoke and poison, but his first question was for Emilia. "Are you hurt?" Tears ran down her face as she shook her head. She looked back at the burning sign above the shop. "Everything is gone." Adrian rose slowly and stood beside her. "No, the building is gone. Everything that mattered walked out with us." Robert stepped forward, shame filling his tired eyes. He admitted that he had faked his death after discovering Vittorio's conspiracy. He believed disappearing would keep Emilia safe, but his silence had left her carrying debts and grief alone. "I thought distance would protect you," he said. "Instead, it taught you that people leave." Emilia did not forgive him immediately. She embraced him, then told him trust would have to be rebuilt one honest day at a time. Adrian watched her choose love without surrendering her dignity, and something inside him finally broke open. 3 months later, Vittorio, Celeste Luca, and Marcus Shaw were convicted through the evidence hidden in Robert's coded recipes. Adrian dissolved the corrupt shipping trust, compensated the families harmed by Vittorio, and removed every official who had betrayed his organization. Yet the choice that surprised New York most had nothing to do with power. On the site of the destroyed bakery, Adrian built a new 2-story shop with wide windows, blue awnings, and Emilia's name above the door. He offered to give it to her without conditions. Emilia refused until the deed listed her as the sole owner, and the business plan included paid training for women rebuilding their lives after humiliation, poverty, or abandonment. Adrian smiled when she handed the contract back. "Still giving me orders? Someone has to teach you boundaries." On opening morning, sunlight filled the bakery with warm gold. Customers crowded the tables, Tasha managed the register, and Robert worked quietly in the kitchen, earning back his daughter's trust one recipe at a time. Emilia wore a deep green dress beneath her apron. She had not changed her body, hidden her curves, or made herself smaller for anyone. When a reporter asked Adrian why a man like him had risked his empire for a baker, he took Emilia's flour-dusted hand in front of every camera. "Because she risked her life for me before she knew my name," he said. And because she saw a man where everyone else saw power. Later, when the shop was quiet, Adrian knelt beside Emilia, near the same kind of display case where their story had begun. He did not offer her ownership, protection, or a place in his empire. She already possessed all three. He offered partnership. "I once judged you without hearing the truth," he said. "Spend the rest of your life making certain I never do it again." Emilia laughed through her tears and told him to stand before the floor ruined his expensive suit. Then she kissed him and said yes. The mafia boss who had ordered her death became the man who protected her choices, and the woman everyone underestimated became the heart that saved his life, his family, and his future. Would you have forgiven Adrian after that first terrible order, and could you trust Robert after 8 years of silence? Share your answer in the comments. And subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories of danger, healing, and unexpected love.